Welcome back to the Chasing Happiness podcast, an honest podcast about finding happiness, what it really means, and the process of getting there. My name is Crystal, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Leah Abraham, and I possibly cannot do her justice, but I'm going to give a brief introduction. So Leah and I met on Clubhouse, which people will not be surprised to hear who listen to this podcast, because it seems like everybody I know these days comes to me through Clubhouse. But nonetheless, Leah and I met through a couple of different rooms on Clubhouse because she is a childhood trauma expert. And we're going to talk about what exactly that means and what she does. But before we get into that, Leah, do you want to just briefly say hello and let people know sort of what you do who are listening to the podcast?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Crystal. And I think it's a beautiful thing that so many of your guests are from the Clubhouse community, because there is greatness in the communities that we are already a part of, Absolutely. So I think it's wonderful that you're highlighting these individuals. So I feel very honored to be here. So yes, I'm Leah Abraham, and I work with adults who are ready to begin the difficult journey of dealing with their childhood traumas. I also help them see their addictions with new perspective. So that's kind of what I do in a nutshell. I've created a 5-step healing process that's very unique and very effective. So that's kind of the work that I do in a nutshell.
And she says in a nutshell, she's tied it up in a little bow, but this is pretty complicated, deep things, yes. Right? We're talking about really hard wounds, not just to face and to acknowledge, but to actually process and work through. So what drove you down this sort of path in life?
So I have been on my own personal journey, and I think as so many of us who have been on the difficult journey of healing will tell you that on the other side, and of course it's a lifelong journey. So don't get me wrong there that I've come through onto the other side and I'm done. It's a lifelong journey, but I have done the difficult work to heal. And I think those of us who have done that work, all we want is to help others experience that same type of healing and peace. And so really that's my drive, is that I know what my life was like prior to healing and what it's like now, and the clarity and, just the peace surrounding that is so important for everyone to experience, because that's our birthright, to enjoy this life to the fullest. And so that's what drives me, is just knowing how many people out there are suffering and dealing with these traumatic events from childhood and that really deserve healing. So that's what drives me.
And I think that's really important, because you made a distinction about I've worked on and healed, but it's a lifelong journey. Because I think a lot of people, especially when they first start to think about these things, they think, oh, well, my whole life has fallen apart. Everything is a disaster. If I just deal with this one thing, everything will be perfect. And much as the case for most of life, there's always work to continually be done going forward. So I think it's really important for people to understand that. But you can still, even though there is work to be done, you can still find joy and healing and comfort and all of that by working through what has previously happened in life.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Crystal. A lot of people say it's like an onion, but I like to say it's like a peony, because, those beautiful flowers, they have so many layers too. And that's what our healing is like. There's different layers to the healing. You heal, something that you see like externally, but under that is another layer of a deeper wound. And like you said, yes, before healing, the path that we're on is very narrow and difficult. But as we heal, the path opens up to us and we experience all the different beauties of this life. So you're exactly right. It is a journey, but as we continue on this journey, the scenery gets better. So, yes.
Which is ultimately, I think, as you said earlier, sort of what we all deserve, what we're all aiming for, whether we realize it or not, right? We have a right being here to enjoy what is here, But as is the case in most circumstances, along the way, as we grow up, things happen and, damage occurs, both spiritually, emotionally, physically, whatever it happens to be. And so then, at some point we have a responsibility as adults to fix that and not carry that with us for the rest of our lives. And so people like you are really important, because if someone like me doesn't know where to start, the best thing we can do is reach out to someone who does, who's been there, who's done the work, who understands what the journey is. So for people who are listening and they're now thinking, well, maybe I do have trauma, how do I even begin? What suggestions would you have for people?
Oh, Crystal, thank you so much for speaking to that, because it is so important. And, it is my belief that we all have trauma. Granted, the levels, vary based on what our soul came here to experience and to learn. But we all have trauma because in order to learn the lessons we need in this life, we first have to experience separation. If we just came here knowing that we're this light being and that, all this knowledge of the universe, we would never learn what we needed to. So I do believe that we all have some levels of trauma that force that separation. And then it's about coming back home to ourselves. And so for those of you who are thinking, well, maybe I do have trauma in my life, and how do I start? That's the first step, is just acknowledging that there is something that you want to work on and being open to whatever comes into your life next. I think you make a good point about having a coach to help guide you. And I like to talk about it. If you're going on a safari, you want a guide that has been on that journey before,
Right.
that knows what could happen out there and knows how to handle any situations. If a wild animal attacked you, that guide would know how to protect you in that moment. They know the path, and they've walked it before. So it's the same with your healing journey. You want to make sure that you find a guide who has been through it and who knows how to help you when difficult situations come up. So really, to begin, it's just opening yourself up to the idea that you want to. And then, the universe will put into place the next right steps for you.
Which I 100% believe in, because obviously, as I said, we met on Clubhouse. And it's interesting because I've sort of been on this personal journey of mine for about 6 years or so now. And I walked into Clubhouse and met you in the Intentional Connector community. But because you do so many different things on Clubhouse, I have followed you into other spaces. And the conversations, not only that I've been able to take part in, but the conversations that I've just been able to witness of people talking openly and honestly about all of these traumas and doing it in a space where there's no judgment, there's no fear about any kind of retribution or any kind of negativity. It's literally about allowing it to release in a safe space is such a huge thing. So do you want to talk a little bit about the rooms that you do on Clubhouse so that people who are listening can come and find you?
Absolutely. Thank you, Crystal. So on Thursdays, every Thursday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, I host my Trauma Drama Room. And in that space, we focus primarily we talk about all childhood abuse. But primarily we focus on sexual abuse, because I have found in doing this work that there are so many who are affected by this specific type of abuse. And so you're exactly right. Being able to create a safe space where people can speak about their traumas is so, so important, because when we can speak our traumas out loud, it does two things. It removes the heavy energy from within us, and it allows others to sort of absorb little parts of our story and transmute and process it with us. And the energy is lighter for all of us. So it's like a collective healing that happens in those spaces where we're hearing the stories of others And we're knowing that we're not alone and that we are supported in this community. So it's been really powerful to hold these spaces. So I do that Trauma Drama Thursday room every Thursday. I'm also a co-moderator in another room on Friday under the Butterfly Effect with a good friend of mine, Stacey Henry Carr, who also works with in trauma. And so that's another trauma room. But I also host other rooms. I do a women's circle in the Being Curious and Fearless Club, and I do the Magical Mindful Moments room on Monday and Tuesday with Sujata Upal. So yeah, there's a lot going on there. Not all the rooms that I do are real heavy on the topic of trauma. I like to be in other spaces where I can share my perspective and opinion on other aspects of life, because I think that's important too. But definitely where my heart is that trauma drama room, because it does create that space that people need to normalize these conversations about sexual abuse specifically. So thank you, Crystal.
Yeah. And for people listening to the podcast, I will include links in the show notes for social media and for Clubhouse and for all of that fun stuff so that you can find Leah. You can follow her around and stalk her on Clubhouse like I did in the beginning.
Yay.
So one of the things I do want to chat about is this last year. So I live in Canada, you live in the United States. Things have been very different between our two countries as far as COVID and everything else that we've had to deal with. But one of the great things that I think has come out of this is a lot of people feel connected around the world now in a way that we didn't feel connected before. So I want to ask you, how has the last 17 months or so been for you? And how have you gone about processing it? Because I think a lot of people are still struggling, especially here in Canada, because we've had so many lockdowns, with how to process it all. And that, in my opinion, is going to be a collective trauma for us as a world going forward for a little while.
Definitely. So this is an interesting question, Crystal, because yes, it is a trauma that we've all experienced. But I think if we step back and look at the big picture of things, there has been so many blessings that have come from this time. It's really been a time of great reflection for the environment and for us as individuals. So many people have literally had to sit with themselves, and it's forced us to look within and to really ask the questions, am I happy in this life? Or is this really what I want to be doing? There's been so many who have shifted their career paths. There has been so many that have gone into the entrepreneurial space and really connected to their passions and begun to pursue those. So for me, I think it's just been a huge time of reflection. And when we have those times of reflection from that, so much change can happen. And it has, so granted, there's been difficulties. I am not a teacher. So having my children at home schooling was really difficult for all of us. And of course, the social interaction, we missed that. So that has been such a blessing for everything to be lifted here and to be able to go to concerts again and commune as in groups and stuff like that. But ultimately, my take on it is that it's given us all an opportunity to really reflect and go deeper with ourself, with the connections we have to ourself, and make choices from that space.
I love that. And I think you're right. It's funny. The more I talk to people about sort of how this last year and a half has been, the more I hear, I finally realized, because I had the time to slow down or do this thing, that this isn't what I want to be doing. Or we've decided to move because, the kids and I just want to have more space and not be, in the city, or whatever the circumstances are. And the number of people that I know who are moving or who are changing careers just seems to keep blossoming and blossoming. And so I think you're right in that aspect. I think there is so much change, so much good, wholehearted change coming out of this amongst all of the tragedy. And I think it's a great reminder for us that it, even in the moments when we think everything is dismal and tragic and just, how are we going to recover? There is always somewhere where you can look to see a little bit of that light, and it doesn't stay that dark forever, which is a huge thing, right?
Crystal, that's so beautiful and ties into the work that I do, because it's so true. The darkness and the light need each other, just like, winter needs summer, and so many other polarities in this human experience. And so I think to look at it in that way is really important, because nothing lasts forever. Things are always changing, and the opposites need one another. That dark needs the light. So yes, I think that's important.
And that's one of the things that I love about you and the conversations that you have. When I pop into a room for 5 or 10 minutes, is there's always this respect for both sides. It's never this toxic positivity that people talk about. It's always, listen, you're struggling, honor the feeling that you're having, honor the place that you're sitting. You're, emotionally bankrupt at this moment. It's okay. At some point you won't be, we will get you there, kind of thing. But in the moment, be where you are, and that's okay. Just like it's okay to be super excited about whatever is coming your way. And that's a big deal to a lot of people, because it's hard. It can be hard. I don't want a blanket statement, but it can be hard to find places where it's okay to have those negative thoughts and emotions as well as the positive ones.
And actually where they're encouraged, because in order for us to really make a change, we have to see things clearly. And that means looking at the entire picture. If we're only looking at the positive side of things and neglecting these shadow parts of ourselves, then we're not looking at the whole picture, and we're not doing ourselves justice, because those shadow parts of us are a part of us. Right. And the goal is to embrace and accept ourselves fully. And that means including those shadow parts. So yes, it's so, so important to meet ourselves where we are. And sometimes we are in the darkness, and that is perfectly okay. In fact, it's encouraged.
I love that. I absolutely love that. It's one of the many, many things that I love about you. So I do want to ask you, because I think I joined Clubhouse end of February. So we probably met maybe the beginning of March, end of February-ish. And I feel like the people who I meet on Clubhouse, even though we don't necessarily talk every day, even though, there's not this like huge social thing going on, I still feel like the connections that you make on Clubhouse are so much more deep and meaningful in ways that, like, Zoom conversations, when you walk into a random, I don't know, networking event or whatever it happens to be, they're not the same. And I wonder if you have experienced the same thing, and sort of what your thought process is about that, because one of the reasons I talk about Clubhouse as much as I do on this podcast is because I'm able to make connections with people like you and the rest of our community. And they feel like such a deep soul connection, even though we've never met in person. And I'm guessing I'm not the only one that experiences that, but I don't know for sure, right?
Oh, Crystal, yes. I think what's important about this audio app is that it removes the layer of judgment that comes with the visual, because we're not sitting here judging ourselves or comparing ourselves to the other person. We're just speaking from our heart or whatever. And I think there is so much connection through the voice, because it's a vibration. it's a vibrational pattern of energy. And those are the things that we really connect with, because if you break everything down, everything really is just patterns of energy that we're absorbing and connecting to and vibrating on with. And so I think through the voice, it connects us to those who are vibrating at the same level as we are. So it just kind of makes it easier for those deeper connections to occur. So yes, I've heard that so much that the audio is awesome for that particular reason, that it removes that layer of judgment that we get from the visual. But it is also nice to then get on Zoom calls with these people you've connected with, and because then you just feel like friends, and it's it's past that point of the awkwardness of like, oh, whatever comes with all that. So
that's exactly what I feel has happened. Because for me, it's like a couple of weeks ago, I actually think it was 2 Fridays ago, maybe, you were in a room. We were doing Fireworks Friday, and you were talking about a concert you had been to and the energy, because it's the first time you've been to a concert since COVID, and how that collective energy had changed. And through that, my energy changed and everyone else's energy changed. And, I was chatting with a couple of people who were in the room later, and it was like, you skip all of the awkward getting to know you stage and you just feel people for that energetic level. And it's such an amazing thing. I can't, it's been such a big blessing for me in my life.
I like that you said that, Crystal. You feel people. Oh, that's beautiful. That's 100%. What it is. Feel people. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I love that, like you said, we remove the judgment, because unfortunately we do live in this society that has this judgment, this visual judgment of things, whether it be, how you look, what you wear, how you speak, all of these things. You go somewhere where you don't have that image. And let's be frank, sometimes we walk into rooms and people's profile pictures, even though you can have a profile picture, they have a cat or they have a book cover or something. And so you literally have no idea what these people look like. And your brain tries to imagine it, but you connect to the feeling, you connect to the energy and how they're speaking and the emotion that comes along with it. And that's, I hope and I wish that all of society could be that way. My hope is maybe when your kids are older, we'll be down that path, but we'll see. I love the energetic force behind it all.
I think that's beautiful vision, and I support you in that.
So the work that you do is really heavy stuff sometimes. So I want to know, if you're willing to share, how do you process everything? Because as you said, it is an energy exchange. All of these clubhouse rooms, when you're working with clients, there's an energy exchange there. And what you're dealing with sometimes can be really heavy and really emotional. So do you have a self-care routine? How do you process all of that?
Crystal, that's a beautiful question. And thank you for asking it, because you're exactly right. A lot of what is shared in these rooms is heavy. But, ultimately, what it comes down to is purpose. Like, this is what I came here to do, and so holding space for individuals who are sharing their deep wounds, it's part of who I am. So I think the way that I am able to handle it is that I've learned where my energetic boundary ends and the other person's begins. And I can just hold space and listen to their story, knowing that it's not an actual event that's taking place right now, right. That it is something that they're processing and they're releasing that energy. This conversation, it's interesting that it went to energy, but I think that's important too, because it helps you see things differently, where it's not taking on this heaviness. It's really just about creating a space where they can release that energy. And, it can go, like I said, when we're in a group, we all sort of take a little piece of it and process it for that person and transmute it into a different energy. So, I don't ever feel like it's difficult. There are times, when they're sharing and I'm crying here, I'm crying in the back because it's painful to know that they had to go through that as a child. So I'm not saying, I'm cut off from my emotions. In fact, often it helps me connect deeper to those emotions that the stories tell, but I'm not attached to it. And I know that it's helping them. And in doing so, it's fueling my fire. So I hope that answers. I do also listen to a lot of music after. I used to have my own coach that I would meet with after my Trauma Drama Thursday rooms. But I've since realized that I'm not so much in need of that, because I know this is where I want to be. And ultimately it just makes me feel good to be able to create these spaces where others can begin healing. So
that's such a huge thing. And I think it's so important for people listening to hear, because a lot of times we feel sort of called to do something, but then the fear of, well, how is that going to impact us? How is it going to change us? What is that going to do to us emotionally, spiritually, if we follow that path? And I think you're right. Most of the time, if you end up doing that thing that you feel called to do, even in those circumstances, it doesn't necessarily hit you with that deep sort of draining emotion. It's more of a, I understand this is where I'm meant to be, and it's okay. I can let go of what's not mine and still do this thing, which is huge for people.
Yes. Surrendering to your purpose. It's so important. It's so important that we all live in purpose. We came here for a specific reason, and it's wonderful when we connect with that purpose and surrender to it. It's really about surrendering to that. So
I love that. I love that surrender came up as well. Oh, I love talking to you. So
thank you, Crystal. Same.
Aw. So for people who are listening to this podcast who have maybe never thought about how to figure out their purpose or what that looks like, how did you find yours? How did you figure out this was where you were meant to be?
Oh, thank you for asking this question, Crystal. So it has been my experience for now 3 years of kind of speaking to people about this, diving deeper into this work, starting my business, having clients, working through the 5-step healing process. It has been my experience that always our pain is tied to our purpose. And also, I'd like to add just another piece to that often our addictions also are tied to our purpose. So it's really about recognizing why these things happened for us, giving us the tools that we need to step into our purpose. And I'm going to give you an example. And this is, a client that I've worked with who I have her permission to share her story. But her abuse was physical abuse. Her father, physically abused her. And so then her addiction was a sexual addiction, the physical part of that. Mm-hmm. And her purpose, the work that she does and that fuels her fire, is she is a massage therapist. She heals people through her touch. Mm-hmm. And so if you can see how those all play into what she came here to do, mm-hmm. and when you heal the pain from that from that harmful touch, and you acknowledge why it turned into an addiction of that physical touch, she was able to step into her purpose of healing others with her touch. So it works like that so often. I see that so often, that what we endured in our traumas eventually, turns into addiction for many. Right. But then on the other side of that healing, it really fuels our purpose. It gives us the tools that we need to work in purpose.
That's huge. And that's such an important story because I think a lot of people think, based on conversations I've had with clients, a lot of people think, well, this horrible thing happened and I need to be as far away from it as possible, rather than looking at how it's impacted the rest of their life. And does that thing that happened to you actually lead you to that purpose? Such an important story for people to hear unfold. So thank you for sharing that.
Yes. Thank you for allowing me to highlight that because it is important.
So typically with the podcast, I will end by asking a bunch of questions to my guest. But before I do that, is there anything that you want to share that we haven't shared yet with the Chasing Happiness community?
Yes. I want to let listeners know that trauma is painful. It's definitely painful. And that when we heal, it's about going back through that pain. So it is painful also. But what I have to remind people is that we endured this trauma, this pain as children. So we definitely have the capability to deal with the pain of healing, because the pain of healing is not the trauma. So if we were able to endure that as children, we can most definitely endure the painful work of healing. Like you talked about, people shy away. They want to get as far away from it as possible because it's so painful. And often people avoid the healing process because it's painful too. Right. But the thing is, we can do it. We can do it. And when you do it, it just opens your life up to all that you were meant to experience here. And it's really a beautiful thing. And we can do it. We have the strength to endure it. So that's what I want to kind of leave with. Thank you.
I love that. Thank you so much. So if you're up for answering questions, the first question is, if you could go back in time and give yourself any piece of advice, what would it be?
That would be to love yourself, girl, that you're perfect, whole, and complete, and just love yourself as you are. That would be powerful advice for the younger me to know.
I love that. And I think that's so important because I can relate to that, right? Whether it's the piece of advice that would have come to my mind first, like I can totally relate to that. And I think so many people listening can as well, because we go through this point in our life where we think that that's not the case, right? So having that actually be a reminder. I don't know. Sometimes when I ask this question, I think to myself, like, if I could have a wall when I was like 14 that just had all of these pieces of advice that people would give themselves, would my life have been different, right? Would I have listened to the advice at that point? All of these different things. So I love when people answer that question, because I think so many people can relate to it because we've all kind of been there at different stages.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Self-love is a big thing, and a lot of us lack that. So that would be my advice for my younger self. Just love yourself, girl.
I love it. So what's one thing about yourself that you want to work on?
Something that is a continuous, I was going to say challenge, but a continuous opportunity for me is the way that I respond to the triggers with my children. That's something that I just refuse to believe that, it's meant to be so difficult. And often I talk about it and say, there must be something missing from this equation. And I do think that it's that community, the village mindset. It takes a village to raise a child. And I think in this Western society, we've gone so far away from that. And it puts a lot of pressure on the parent-child relationship. And so I'm working to create a support for myself in that area, because I really I really want to change those patterns that I'm essentially passing down to my children. I want myself to be able to handle those triggers with more grace.
I love that. And that's, I think, such an important thing, because you've made 2 points. One, that we put so much pressure on parents to do this alone. And let's be frank, there is not a single parent that I know, because I do not have children myself. There is not a single parent that I know that can handle everything. We're not meant to. We are collectively meant to, as a society, support each other, raise each other, help each other as a collective. But we have become this society that says, if you can't do it on your own, too bad. And it's such a demeaning place for people to be, because you're human. We're all human. Even if you're a parent, you're human. There are going to be days where you're going to be able to function at a lower level, where you're going to be able to function at a higher level, days where there are more triggers than others. And if we don't allow for there to be some sort of compensation for someone else to pick up the slack on those days, then what are we doing to each other? And what are we teaching kids moving forward? Such an important point. So thank you for making that, because I think so much, especially for new parents. I'm watching a bunch of my friends have babies, and for new parents, there's such a pressure put on new parents. Having a baby is like this horribly mind blown up moment. Like I watched my best friend have twins, and for like 6 months, she couldn't even remember when she showered. Like, if we're putting people in that position where you can't even remember the last time you showered, like, you need a break. Like, I'll do the dishes. Somebody needs to step up in those circumstances. So I love that you brought up the community aspect of it, because I think you're right. I think it does take a village. And I think the village includes more than just family. It's friends, it's neighbors, it's all of the people who we surround ourselves with in life. It's coworkers, it's everybody who you are connected with in different ways for different aspects of that community involvement. But it's such a needed thing in our society.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Crystal, because it is an important piece. It's a huge pice.
So the next question is, what's the best or the worst piece of advice you have ever been given, and why?
So there is a gentleman that I admire his work immensely, Dr. Ernest Holmes, and he is the creator of The Science of Mind, which is where Louise Hay got her practitioner license. Not to be confused with Scientology, but it's The Science of Mind. And in one of his books, I used to listen to this audiobook all the time. And there was one thing that stood out to me so strongly, and it stayed with me over these last 5 years. And I share it often. And that is, only our own soul can say what is right and what is wrong for us. I think it's just such an empowering statement, and it's such a guiding statement that we know we have all the answers within us, and what's right for me may not be right for the next person, but I need to go with what's right for me.
Yes. Yes. Because I think so often we see, especially in this social media curated world that we live in, we see this is what it's supposed to be. You go to school, you graduate, you buy a house, you have kids. This is what your life should quote look like. And for so many of us, that just doesn't feel right. And for people like me, you start down that path and you go, what am I doing? Like, nothing about this feels right. And people look at you like you've lost your mind because you're living outside of that box, but you do need to follow that instinct. Otherwise, you end up unhappy and you end up sort of miserable and just going through the motions. And so many of us don't know how to do that, but it starts with listening to your soul. Even if it's totally different than what everyone around you is saying, you have to instinctively listen to that and let that part of you flourish. So I love that you said that. God, I want to just reach through the Zoom and give you a hug right now, because you are so
virtual hug.
Yes. Okay. So the last question is, what does happiness mean to you?
The words that come to mind when I think about happiness are peace and poise. And I think essentially what that comes down to is alignment. Yeah. I would say being in alignment, where our mind, our body, our spirit, are in the present moment and we're operating from that space. I think that is always going to produce a happy outcome. Happiness, yes.
That's fantastic. I love asking this question because for me, over the years, over the days, even sometimes, the definition of happiness changes, but the feeling behind it always remains the same. And I think that's kind of what you mean by that alignment, that purpose, that feeling, that drive always stays the same. But the actual definition of, today it's not storming outside, so I'm happy because I can go out and sit in nature, right? The definition itself might change a little, but the feeling and that purpose behind it is always the same. So I love, love, love when people answer that question. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're so welcome. And I think I just want to highlight what you just said, that it changes all the time. But if we are in alignment in that present moment, whatever comes to us at that time, we're always going to make the right decision for us in that moment. And I think that's happiness, that sovereign power over our curated experience.
Yes, I love that. Our curated experience, because that's the important part, right? We are curating the experience. We may not be making some of those choices as children, but when you become an adult, you are curating your life. Whether you acknowledge it or realize it or not, you are the one making those choices. You are the one in control with the power. And we get to decide. We get to decide every day what that looks like. And if we don't like it one day, we can change it the next.
Yes. The beauty of being human, we have choice.
Yes, absolutely. We have infinite choice, which sometimes might be a problem, but I love that we always have choice, 100%. Thank you so much for joining me today. I feel like I could talk to you like forever, but I will not keep you all afternoon because it is a Saturday and I want you to spend some time with your family and do all of the other wonderful things that you do. Is there anything else that you want to say before I let you go today?
Crystal, I just want to say it has been such a beautiful journey getting to know you, getting to know the community. We talked about community and at the beginning, I stated, I think it's wonderful that you highlight members of the community because there is greatness in the communities that we are already a part of. And I feel really honored and really seen. And I appreciate you helping me to promote this important work that I'm doing. So I'm just full of gratitude. And this was a lot of fun. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I think for me, the community aspect, especially all of these amazing souls like you that I've met through Clubhouse, they, through COVID, have been my saving grace because we had lockdowns here in Canada and most of it was lockdowns here in Canada. And I got cut off from my actual communities. And having people that I can have these kinds of conversations with, people who I can sit down with and express my true feelings and not have that judgment that we were talking about, and be able to say to the world, hey, I met this amazing person. Here is what they do. Here is how they're helping the world collectively be better. This is the thing that is setting my soul on fire. This is my purpose. So I'm just as appreciative to you for being a part of this and being willing to join me and have an open conversation, and just for the love that you bring into the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Crystal.
And thank you all for listening. I hope you have an amazing week and we will chat with you next week. Bye for now.